Imagine millions of dollars in their hands, the alarms blaring, and then, poof, they're gone. Not a trace. How do master criminals simply vanish after the heist of a lifetime, leaving law enforcement scratching their heads? We're not talking about luck here. This is a meticulously crafted psychological vanishing act where behavioral science meets criminal genius. Today, we're deconstructing the psychology of disappearance, revealing how master criminals evade capture through meticulous planning, psychological resilience, and adaptive strategies that let them dissolve into anonymity. This is the intricate dance of evasion. Let's pull back the curtain. Here's what most people get wrong. The disappearance doesn't begin after the heist. It begins months, sometimes years before. Master criminals understand something fundamental about human psychology. We're creatures of pattern recognition. Law enforcement relies on this. They build profiles, predict behaviors, anticipate movements. So the first psychological strategy? Pattern disruption. These individuals create what psychologists call cognitive camouflage. They establish multiple identities, not just fake IDs, but fully formed personas with credit histories, social connections, and behavioral patterns. They're method acting their own disappearance. Consider the legendary D.B. Cooper case. Before he ever jumped from that plane, he'd already created a psychological profile so generic, so forgettable, that witnesses couldn't agree on basic details. Average height, average build, average everything. This wasn't accident, it was weaponized mediocrity. The psychology here draws from something called social invisibility theory. By occupying the exact center of normalcy, you become psychologically transparent. People's brains literally skip over you because you don't trigger any recognition flags. But there's more. Master criminals also employ what's known as temporal displacement. They create false timelines. They're seen in multiple places, plant evidence suggesting different escape routes, and essentially create a psychological smokescreen that fractures investigative focus. Now we arrive at the critical moment, the actual disappearance. And this is where psychological resilience becomes everything. Most criminals get caught not because of evidence, but because of behavior, panic, emotional tells, the inability to maintain the mask. Master criminals? They've trained themselves in what psychologists call emotional regulation under extreme stress. Think of it as the inverse of PTSD. While trauma typically disrupts normal functioning, these individuals have conditioned themselves to operate at peak cognitive performance precisely when stress hormones flood their system. It's not sociopathy, it's trained psychological compartmentalization. They employ what behavioral scientists call identity shifting. The moment the heist ends, they don't just change clothes, they change psychological posture. Body language shifts, speech patterns alter, even micro-expressions get controlled. They become a different person at the neurological level. Here's where it gets fascinating. Research in behavioral science shows that humans have consistency bias. We expect people to behave consistently with their previous actions. Master criminals exploit this. They do the unexpected. The bank robber becomes the helpful tourist. The jewel thief becomes the concerned citizen. They violate every psychological expectation. And they understand geographic psychology. They know that law enforcement creates search zone mentalities, radiating outward from the crime scene in predictable patterns. So they do something counterintuitive. They stay close, or they leap impossibly far. They avoid the middle zones where searches concentrate. One famous case involved a criminal who hid in a hotel 3 blocks from the heist for 2 weeks, while thousands of officers searched outward. Pure psychological chess. But here's the truth. The real psychological challenge isn't disappearing, it's staying disappeared. This requires what psychologists call sustained identity management, and it's brutally difficult. You're essentially living as a deep cover agent, indefinitely with no support system. The psychological toll is immense. Master criminals who succeed long-term employ several strategies. First, they embrace what's called geographic anonymity. They move to places where their cultural background makes them unremarkable. A European in Latin America, an American in Southeast Asia. They become one face in a sea of similar faces. Second, they practice social minimization. Counter to what movies show, they don't live flashy lives. They become boring, predictable. They take jobs, pay taxes, become model citizens of their new identity. The psychology here is brilliant. By acting exactly like someone with nothing to hide, suspicion never falls on them. They also understand something called relationship containment. Deep relationships create vulnerabilities. People who know your past, your tells, your true self. So they maintain shallow connections, friendly but never intimate. It's lonely but effective. Perhaps most fascinating is their use of cognitive liberty. They give themselves psychological permission to never look back. Many criminals get caught because they can't resist returning to old haunts, contacting family, or following news about their case. Master evaders sever these psychological ties completely. The person they were essentially dies. So there you have it, the psychology of the perfect disappearance. It's a masterclass in behavioral science, requiring meticulous planning, extraordinary psychological discipline, and the willingness to essentially kill your former identity. But here's the final twist. Even those who successfully evade capture for decades report profound psychological costs. Loneliness, identity confusion, a haunting sense of unreality. You can vanish from the world, but you can't vanish from yourself. The perfect disappearance might be possible, but the perfect escape, that's a psychological impossibility. If you found this deep dive into criminal psychology fascinating, subscribe for more behavioral science breakdowns, and leave a comment. Could you psychologically handle disappearing forever? Until next time, remember, the most sophisticated lock isn't on a door, it's in the mind.